The envelope arrived on my desk at 4:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, unmarked except for my name written in Margaret's precise handwriting. Inside was a single brass key and a hotel room number. No explanation. No context. Just those two items and the faint scent of her perfume clinging to the paper. I should have thrown it away immediately. Should have walked straight to HR. Should have done 1,000 things differently than what I actually did, which was slip that key into my pocket and feel my heart hammer against my ribs for the rest of the afternoon. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The real beginning was 3 months earlier, when Margaret Westwood became our new regional director. She walked into the Portland office on a Monday morning in September, all sharp edges and calculated confidence, wearing a black suit that probably cost more than my car payment. She was 42, I knew because office gossip traveled faster than email, and carried herself like someone who'd fought for every inch of the corner office she now occupied. I was 36, married for 9 years to Sarah, and completely unprepared for what was about to happen to my life. The first time Margaret and I worked late together was an accident. A client presentation had gone sideways, and we needed to rebuild the entire pitch deck before morning. Everyone else had families to get home to, or at least that's what they said. I called Sarah around 7, told her I'd be late, heard the familiar sigh on the other end of the line. We'd been having that same conversation for months. Years, maybe. "There's leftover pasta in the fridge," she said, her voice flat with resignation. "I'll grab something here. Don't wait up." The silence before she hung up said more than words ever could. Margaret ordered Thai food around 9. We ate it straight from the containers, sitting on opposite sides of the conference table, laptops glowing between us. She asked about my background, my goals, why I'd stayed at the company for 7 years when my talents clearly exceeded my position. No one had asked me questions like that in a long time. Certainly not Sarah, who seemed to have stopped seeing me as anything more than a paycheck and a warm body on the other side of the bed. "You're better than this place," Margaret said, gesturing around the empty office with her chopsticks. "You know that, right?" I laughed, uncomfortable with the directness. "It pays the bills. So would a dozen other jobs. Better ones." She leaned back in her chair, studying me with those gray eyes that seemed to catalog everything. "You're hiding here, David. Playing it safe. Maybe safe is what I need right now. Is it?" The question hung in the air between us, weighted with implications I wasn't ready to examine. Or is it just easier than admitting you're unhappy? I should have deflected. Should have changed the subject. Instead, I met her gaze and felt something shift inside my chest, a crack in the careful walls I'd built around myself. "Who says I'm unhappy?" But my voice betrayed me, coming out rough and uncertain. Margaret smiled, sad and knowing. Someone who recognizes the look in the mirror. We finished the presentation at midnight. I drove home through empty streets, my hands gripping the steering wheel too tight, my mind replaying that conversation on an endless loop. Sarah was asleep when I got there, curled on her side of the bed, her back to my half. I stood in the doorway watching her breathe, wondering when we'd stopped being us and started being two people who happened to share an address. The second time Margaret and I worked late wasn't an accident. She asked me to dinner the following week, ostensibly to discuss a new project she wanted me to lead. We went to a small Italian place in the Pearl District, sat at a table by the window, and talked for 3 hours about everything except work. She told me about her divorce 5 years earlier, about the loneliness of success, about nights spent in hotel rooms in cities that all looked the same. I told her about the slow erosion of my marriage, about feeling invisible in my own home, about dreams I'd let die because they seemed irresponsible. "Sarah and I don't fight anymore," I said at some point, my wine glass empty in front of me. "That's how I know it's over. We used to fight about everything, money, time, whose turn it was to do the dishes. Now we just exist in the same space. Polite strangers." Margaret reached across the table, her fingers brushing mine. "Just for a second. Just long enough to make my pulse quicken." "You deserve more than that," she said softly. "You both do." I pulled my hand back, twisted the gold band on my finger. I made a commitment. To what? A promise made by two different people a decade ago? "David, you're not the man you were when you married her. She's not the woman you married. People change. Pretending otherwise just makes you both miserable." The rational part of my brain knew she was right. The part of me that still remembered standing at an altar, watching Sarah walk down the aisle in a dress her mother had cried over, saying vows I'd meant with every fiber of my being, that part wanted to argue. Wanted to defend what we'd built, even if the foundation had crumbled. But I didn't. I just sat there, feeling the weight of my wedding ring like an anchor, and let Margaret's words settle into the hollow spaces inside me. The kiss happened 2 weeks after that. Late night at the office again, celebrating a client win with champagne Margaret kept in her desk drawer. We were standing by the window, looking out over the city lights, and she turned to me with this expression I couldn't quite read. "Tell me to stop," she whispered, her hand on my chest. I didn't. God help me, I didn't. Her mouth tasted like champagne and possibility. Her hands in my hair felt like permission to want something for myself, just this once. We broke apart after a minute, or maybe an hour. Time had stopped meaning anything, and I pressed my forehead against hers, breathing hard, terrified and exhilarated and already drowning in guilt. "This can't happen," I said. "I know. I'm married. I know." But neither of us moved away. We stood there in the dark, the city glittering below us, balanced on the edge of a decision that would change everything. I went home that night and found Sarah already asleep, same as always. I lay awake until dawn, that kiss playing on repeat, my wedding ring feeling tighter with each passing hour. The affair began in earnest after that. Stolen moments in Margaret's office after everyone left. Long lunches that had nothing to do with work. Text messages that made my phone feel like evidence of a crime. I deleted everything immediately, cleared my browser history, paid for hotels in cash. The mechanics of deception came easier than I'd expected, which probably said something terrible about me. We were careful. Never in public where someone might see us. Never leaving together. Never anything that could be traced back definitively. Margaret had done this before, not the affair itself, but the careful navigation of office politics, the understanding of what could destroy a career if discovered. She taught me the rules of a game I'd never wanted to play. Keep your phone on silent during meetings, she'd say. Never use your work email. Always have a plausible reason for where you were. She made it sound almost clinical, like risk management instead of betrayal. 3 months in, she said the words that would ultimately bring everything crashing down. We were in her office on a Friday afternoon, both of us pretending to review quarterly reports while stealing glances at each other. She was behind her desk, I was in the chair across from her, maintaining the appearance of professionalism in case anyone walked by. But her eyes were saying things that had nothing to do with spreadsheets. "There's a conference next week," she said, her voice carefully neutral. "In Seattle. 3 days. I'm required to attend, and I can bring one person from my team." My heart started racing. "Margaret, just listen. We could have time. Real time, not these stolen hours. We could wake up together. Have breakfast. Pretend, just for a few days, that this is our real life." I knew I should say no. Knew that crossing this particular line would make everything that came before seem almost innocent by comparison. But God, I wanted it. Wanted to know what it felt like to fall asleep beside her, to wake up to her face instead of Sarah's back turned toward me. "I'll think about it," I said, which we both knew meant yes. That's when she said it. Tuesday morning, just before our team meeting, Margaret stopped by my desk with a folder of documents we didn't need. She set them down, leaned in close enough that I could smell her perfume, and whispered 7 words that would haunt me for the rest of my life. "Leave your wedding ring at home tomorrow." I froze, staring at my computer screen, not trusting myself to look at her. "Tomorrow?" My voice barely worked. "We're leaving at 6 a.m. I'll pick you up 2 blocks from your house." She straightened up, all business again. "Bring comfortable clothes." "And David?" She touched my shoulder briefly. "Don't overthink this. We deserve to be happy." She walked away before I could respond, leaving me sitting there with my heart in my throat and my wedding ring suddenly feeling like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I went home that night in a daze. Sarah was in the kitchen, cooking something that smelled good, humming along to music playing from her phone. For a moment, watching her move around our kitchen in sweatpants and one of my old t-shirts, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. This was my wife. The woman I'd promised forever to. When had I stopped seeing her? When had we stopped trying? "Hey," she said, smiling when she noticed me. Actually smiling. "You're home early. I'm making that chicken thing you like." The one with the lemon and rosemary? I couldn't remember the last time she'd cooked my favorite meal. Couldn't remember the last time she'd smiled at me like that, open, genuine, like she was actually happy to see me. That's great, I managed. Thanks. She studied my face. You okay? You look stressed. Just work stuff. Big project. The lies came automatically now, smooth and practiced. Well, try to relax tonight. We could watch that show you wanted to catch up on. She turned back to the stove, missing the way my expression crumbled. I know we haven't spent much time together lately. I've been thinking maybe we should plan a weekend away or something. Remember how we used to take those trips to the coast? I remembered. Early in our marriage, we'd drive out to Cannon Beach every few months, stay in a cheap motel, walk on the sand for hours. We'd been happy then. Or at least I thought we had. Yeah, I said, my voice hollow. That sounds nice. I went upstairs, sat on the edge of our bed, and stared at my wedding ring. Tomorrow, Margaret had said. Tomorrow morning at 6 a.m., I was supposed to slip this ring off my finger, hide it in a drawer, and walk out of this house toward a different life. Could I do it? Could I really? I thought about Margaret, her laugh, the way she looked at me like I mattered, like I was someone worth knowing. I thought about hotel rooms in Seattle, about 3 days of pretending our reality was something other than an affair built on lies and guilt. Then I thought about Sarah downstairs, cooking my favorite meal, suggesting weekend trips, trying in her own way to reach across the distance that had grown between us. When had she started trying? Had I been too buried in Margaret to notice? I twisted the ring around my finger, feeling the groove it had worn into my skin over 9 years. That night, I barely slept. I lay next to Sarah, listening to her breathe, my wedding ring still on my finger, my phone dark on the nightstand. At 5:30 a.m., it buzzed with a text from Margaret. Almost there. Ready? I stared at those 2 words for a full minute. Ready. Was I ready to blow up my life? Ready to become the man who abandoned his wife for his boss? Ready to trade 9 years of history for 3 days in Seattle? My finger hovered over the keyboard. The ring caught the early morning light filtering through the curtains. Sarah stirred beside me, her hand reaching out in sleep to find my arm. She did that sometimes, unconscious and instinctive, like even in sleep she was making sure I was still there. I looked at her hand on my arm. Looked at my wedding ring. Looked at Margaret's text. And finally, after 3 months of terrible decisions, I made one good one. I can't do this. I'm sorry. I turned my phone off before I could see her response. Before I could change my mind. Before I could ruin any more than I already had. Sarah woke up an hour later to find me sitting in the kitchen with coffee, my wedding ring still on my finger, tears on my face I didn't bother to hide. David? She stood in the doorway, alarmed. What's wrong? I told her everything. Not because I was brave or noble, but because I couldn't carry it anymore. The weight of the secrets, the lies, the double life, it was crushing me, and I needed it out. She listened without interrupting, her face going through a dozen emotions I couldn't name. When I finished, she stood there for a long moment, her arms wrapped around herself. Are you in love with her? She finally asked. I thought about it. Really thought about it. I don't know. Maybe I was in love with feeling wanted. Feeling seen. And you don't feel that with me. It wasn't a question. I haven't. Not for a long time. But Sarah. I looked up at her, this woman I'd shared almost a decade with. I don't know when we stopped trying. But sitting here now, I want to try again. If you'll let me. If it's not too late. She was quiet for so long I thought she might tell me to leave. Instead, she sat down across from me, her hands flat on the table. It might be too late, she said, her voice shaking. I don't know if I can forgive this. I don't know if we can come back from it. I know. But I want to try. Tears spilled down her cheeks. God help me, I still want to try. I resigned from my position 2 days later. Couldn't stay, couldn't face Margaret, couldn't pretend everything was normal. The gossip probably filled in the blanks, office affairs weren't exactly rare. I didn't care. Let them think what they wanted. Sarah and I went to counseling. Hours and hours of it, picking apart our marriage, examining where we'd failed each other, learning how to talk again. It was brutal and necessary, and some days I wasn't sure either of us would make it through. But we did. Slowly, painfully, we found our way back to something that resembled us. I found a new job, took a pay cut, started over in a smaller company where I didn't carry the weight of what I'd done. Sarah started painting again, something she'd given up years ago. We took that trip to the coast, walked on the beach like we used to, and tried to remember who we'd been before we'd lost each other. Some nights I still think about Margaret. About what might have happened if I'd gotten in that car, if I'd left my wedding ring in the drawer, if I'd chosen the easy escape over the hard work of rebuilding. I don't know if we would have been happy. I suspect, like most affairs, the reality wouldn't have lived up to the fantasy. What I do know is this: every morning when I wake up, my wedding ring is still on my finger. Some mornings that feels like victory. Other mornings it feels like penance. Maybe it's both. Sarah and I aren't perfect. We probably never will be. But we're trying, and some days, trying is enough. We're learning to see each other again, to choose each other again, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Last week, Sarah asked me if I had any regrets. I thought about Margaret's whispered words, * leave your wedding ring at home tomorrow *, and how close I'd come to doing exactly that. Every day, I told her honestly. I regret every moment I spent lying to you. Every time I chose someone else over us. But do you regret staying? Her eyes searched mine. I looked down at my hand, at the gold band that had witnessed every terrible choice and every attempt at redemption. No, I said. That's the one thing I don't regret. She nodded, squeezed my hand, and we sat there together in the quiet aftermath of everything we'd broken and were slowly, carefully trying to rebuild. The ring stays on now. Every day. Every night. A reminder of vows I broke and vows I'm keeping. A promise I'm still learning how to keep.